third time lucky, guys. Are you using sensors to monitor post-occupancy in terms of the deliverables that you might have expected from your designs through building information modeling in terms of energy efficiency and, well, energy efficiency, I suppose, being the main one?
So, the direct answer is yes. Can you move me to the microphone? Perfect, thank you. So the quick answer is yes, we do monitor our buildings for post-occupancy. We have one monitor per building for the total building use for energy. And we use that information to, later on down the road, we look at energy auditing, or our current facilities, we look at where we want to spend our money. That we have about $2 million each year in our energy budget that we do, post-occupancy renovations for our energy auditing program. We also have our building automation systems inside our buildings. It is a challenge because each of our buildings has usually a different version of our building automation system, but we still can track that as well too, of how each of our components are performing. Other than that, we have occupancy sensors to actually control the lighting and heat sources for our facilities, but the actual energy meters are a single energy sensor for each of our buildings.
Thank you very much, Craig. Any other questions? One just here.
So this is actually a question for Sean, but Stephen, sorry. The PenSAT guys have obviously, as an institution, have realized that they're not just procuring physical assets, but they're procuring the information about the assets, and they're being quite deliberate in how they're sort of procuring that information. I suppose from the government's point of view, we've been spending a lot of money on buildings, and Grange Mormon will just be one project. Just trying to get to the point. There is no standard at the moment of how information is produced. There's no accepted standard. And we have a tradition in Ireland to reinvent the wheel, spend a lot of money and time reinventing the wheel, and our energy assessment program would be an example of that. There's been a British standard available since 1999, the BS 1192, on how information should be produced. That's been developed further recently to the PAS 1192, and where we don't have a national standard ourselves, we tend to use British standards. Is there anything in the Capital Works framework that prevents a government client from specifying a standard of information?
No, not. Why not just adopt that? I suppose the real reason that feedback that will come back to us will be is we haven't had a need for it before. If we set a standard now that's too high, the first thing that the government will do is they'll actually say, okay, let's do a test case and see what we actually do. Because we will find that in any information you take about a building, you take this building compared to a school, two very different complex buildings, different end user, different technology instance in each of the buildings. The department, probably the standard that they would look to have would be the standard that they already set out in their own technical guidance documents. It would be a standard that would allow us to make decisions on the future of that building, with regards to refurbishment or maintenance works. To answer your question, no, there wouldn't be anything wrong with specifying UK or European norm standard.
Even in a non-building world, the information you're procuring at the moment, what is the standard?
Well, I think if we go back to how we would say procure information collection on a site, start project initially, the architect or the engineer will sit down and formulate a brief of what information required. And I think that's the standard we're actually at in this country. I don't think that we've adopted UK standards at the end level. I mean, I think that's clear. They all have clear, but collectively the end level is going to cost us a lot more money. I think that that's probably the main factor. I do agree with you. I do agree that we do need an inventory of accommodation. We set out a mandatory amount of information that should be collected on every resource that we use.
Okay, any other questions? In the middle there.
Hi, I'm Lydia O'Connor from Intel. I have a question for the guys at Penn State. You talked about the cost savings for design. Do you have a little bit more information on the cost savings you've seen in the construction phase of the project? And also, just wondering about design and construction, what kind of schedule savings have you seen?
Can you please repeat the question? Somebody a little bit closer to the microphone.
All right, sorry. I was just wondering, you were talking about the design savings you saw for your small, medium, and high-cost projects. Maybe you can give us some savings you saw during construction also, based on using the BIM models. And then also, if you could just let us know about some schedule savings you saw.
On the construction side, we're seeing about 10 to 15% savings through MEP coordination and just producing a better construction model. And is there any additional parts of that question that needs to be answered? We heard the construction advantages.
Is there any savings that you saw during design and during the construction phase for schedule of your project, like your project duration?
Program, timeline.
So in addition to construction, just with the design model, we've seen a large advantage from the less time for designers in the construction administration, RFIs. There's a lot of studies in regards to that, and we do see it. And we've had a shift with our, looking at a shift of our fee structure to pay for more the coordination up front in design, so we're still paying very close to the same percentage, but it's just shifted earlier in design phase.
And as we said in our presentation, one of the nice things is we've reduced change orders. Field changes were killing us, quite honestly. Some of those were generated by us as an owner, not having our end users not understand a set of drawings. So by going to a model, as Eric showed in his presentation, they can see things. So we're making those owner changes earlier, which drives the cost significantly down. And the other side is we're not getting change orders because things aren't going together well in the field or in construction. So we're seeing our change orders drop from probably a value of somewhere between 7 and 8 or 10% of construction costs. We're driving that down to well less than half.
And when Ed says owner, we have a meeting for the end users who are actually going to occupy that facility, and that's Eric's presentation showed a lot on that of the end user visualization. We also bring the facility managers into our bid meetings and have them discuss, operation. We look at, some of my lecture went towards that of where we actually worry about our maintenance workers and their space they have and the efficiency of their work after the building's occupied.
Yeah, we detect a lot of potential issues with maintenance and added future maintenance costs just by walking our maintenance technicians through the facilities. They can pick up a lot of things that the initial designer didn't think of, just because they're constantly in there working on equipment day after day. They can identify a lot of things that they have trouble with in other buildings and prevent it.
One other issue is we often, in some of our newer buildings, we run into problems right after construction where we take an occupancy and all of a sudden we find issues related to maintaining that facility. So our big joke is, we don't finish a building for years later because we're picking up all the pieces that we missed during design and construction. So it causes us not to be able to close out a project, additional costs, having people come back and do work. So looking at these maintenance issues early on is also saving us money in the long run.
So in terms of cost, $1 we save in design relates to $10 we save in construction relates to $100 we save in operations.
That's US dollars. It's not quite a euro, but.
Okay, James, your question?
No, sorry, that was the same question.
Same question. Anybody else? More down the back.
Hi guys, good morning or good evening, whichever is for you. You're obviously collecting a lot of information regarding all your assets. You're getting a lot of data as well as the geometric data in the 3D model. How are you utilising that in the field, in the facilities management space? Are the guys able to access that from the plant rooms before they go out? Is that something you're utilising, or is it all stuck in Revit back in the drawing office?
In here, jumping on there. So the initial savings we see with the information we collect on assets is the data entry that's done into our CMMS system. So we're saving our data analysts a lot of time to enter that information. They can actually, rather than data entry, they can perform what they're hired to do, which is predictive or preventive maintenance before predictive. So they're spending a lot more time developing these maintenance plans, which on a typical building, maybe $30 to $1 million, we usually takes them a week or two to enter that information. So we save that initial time, and the value added for them actually performing the preventive maintenance is extremely beneficial. On the geometry side, we're not providing a lot of the geometry right now to our facility managers, but that's we're waiting until our new Maxwell system's up and running to be able to link the information with the geometry.
Some of the driving factors for our information processes that we've put in place were driven because a lot of times we don't even know all the equipment that's installed in our buildings. A lot of times our maintenance technicians won't even figure out that we have equipment installed until something goes wrong. So with this, we've on every new construction project now, we are barcoding the equipment the second that it's installed, and that's actually being tracked through payment of the subcontractors who are installing it. So that way we're ensuring that we have accurate information on every piece of equipment that's installed.
And I kind of alluded to this. The people at OPP that handle that is our work control center. And quite honestly, they were ecstatic because when we started talking about automating the system, for a lot of reasons, as Eric said, number one, they weren't getting every piece of equipment that we were installing because they were actually going to our drawings, flipping pages, and picking equipment up on those drawings throughout the design process. They weren't integrated into the process. They were end receivers of information. The second thing is they wouldn't get those turnover documents until late in the process, if at all. So we had equipment that was running to failure because we didn't know it existed. Again, Eric talked about that. So we've seen, they were very happy with this process. First of all, because we integrated them into it at the beginning, and second of all, they were getting information very early in the process.
Okay, excellent. Any more questions? I'll take two more maybe, because I appreciate everybody who's out here this morning and they have jobs to do and meetings to go to. There's one down the back of the hall.
Just a question really on justifying.
Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, Pat Slattery from Arctos. One of the challenges we seem to have for the campus project that's been planned in Dublin is justifying the initial investment cost of getting up and running in BIM for the Development Authority. I just wonder about your thoughts on that. I mean, for me as a taxpayer, the cost of not investing it seems to be quite high. I'm just wondering, how did you originally justify the cost of investment into BIM?
Can you please repeat that question?
So I try and make it shorter maybe. Just a challenge the Campus Development Authority have is justifying the initial investment cost of implementing BIM on the project. So just your thoughts on that.
From a university perspective, any public school, public college in the United States. It's not something that we're particularly proud of, but we're always trying to drive down the cost of tuition. So we're trying to look at our overhead costs and how we can reduce those. And in Eric's presentation, he talked about saving about $2 million US dollars a year. That was the business case that we started with BIM for facility management. That was done, again, quite honestly, it was done at a conference here in the U.S. We had our boss, one of the managers here, go with us, and it was done during a presentation. Like we're sitting here, we were listening to the conversations on the stage, and we were figuring out some numbers, and it was a very simple thing of $2 million a year is a lot of money. And if we could return that just at the beginning. So the whole basis was to drive down our costs while maintaining our quality of construction. And schedule was important too, but it was really about driving down costs. That first cost alone was huge. And then, as we already accepted the fact that we had savings in construction and design, but really what we saw was, as Craig said earlier, it's the 110, 100. 80% of our cost of our building is in operation. So we targeted the big nut, and we went after the operation side first. And then, the other thing we talked about is we've only been doing this for about 5 years. It's really amazing, as I said, where we've come in 5 years. I can't imagine where we're going to be in the next 5, but we're developing these costs. Fortunately for us, we've been able to show enough of a business plan that nobody's really asked us here at Physical Plan to come up with the true cost or true cost savings. We're working with some of our graduate students in the architectural engineering program to try to drive these costs and develop these financial models. But it's not something that we're required to do, so we have a ton of data. Anybody's interested, let us know. We'll help provide that information.
And on the project level to justify using them, again, as I went through, there's a lot of savings that can be seen both in design, and then you can optimize design of these efficiencies. Once you bring the end users into these buildings, we quickly found that a lot of times the end users who aren't familiar with engineering, they have difficulty understanding what they're actually buying when they just look at engineering plans. So by walking them through this, we can prevent a lot of late-term project changes, which are extremely expensive in cost when they're done very late in the project. So we see a lot of savings just by preventing a lot of those costs, and as I said, reducing change orders, and then optimizing for maintenance in the future.
And, I would add to that, if it's done early, there's a very minimal cost to the project. And when we first started implementing BIM, we did see some designers throw up their arms a little bit and say, come back with maybe here's a $90,000 adjustment to our fee for doing BIM, and we talked them through it and said, here's what we're trying to do. You're modeling in 3D, you're entering information. I don't know what that thing is.
Yeah.
We're having,
There we go.
where you're just entering information in the record model that some of it will already be there. So we've gotten that $90,000 change order down to nothing.
And for the very large projects, we find, again, there is some initial cost for firms trying to start to use BIM and BIM technologies. But on the large projects, if you push that as being the status quo, you can typically reduce that cost down to next to nothing.
Okay, thank you very much.
We lost all video. Can you guys hear us? We're going to mute for a minute. Can you tell us if you can still hear us?
I think, yes, we
We
can.
can hear you, yeah, perfectly.
We're almost done anyway. I think we've one more question if there's one in the room.
Okay, we still have you.
Could I have the
We're in good shape for more questions.
Could I have the mic back, please? Thank you very much. I'd just like to conclude and thank everybody for being here today. I think it's been very, very useful, very informative, and obviously a lot of food for thought here. I think while I think it's a bigger problem than most people in the room, Basically, it's obvious that this approach to the delivery of buildings in the industry is the way of the future. We have to embrace it, find a way to embrace it. I think Tom will give us a real live example as to how it can be done and what it can achieve. I think the guys in Penn State have talked about a program for a major educational establishment and 5 years experience, and they give the metrics there, which is out of food for thought. And Stephen then has identified where the challenges are in terms of our own current regulations and rules and how we have to adopt them to make these things happen. Obviously, we're all into efficiencies and finding better ways to spend public monies, and the arguments have been made. I think the guys in Penn State have identified that the issue is really about using metrics and experiences like what the guys have introduced here today, and try and use those metrics to persuade people in positions of power that savings can be made and an upfront investment will be returned several fold. The other big message that I can pick from the one discussion this morning is the importance of life cycle costing for the building. Traditionally, a lot of the construction industry particularly just delivered design and construct and walked away. Clients and users, owners are now realising more and more the extent of life cycle costing and actually properly providing for that in budgetary arithmetic and providing for proper FM if you like, programs and management. And I think that alone that's a different level of investment. You're investing a huge amount that will be up front in the design build stage as they will see it, but the payoff is later on. That's the key message that needs to be, if you like, taken away, and it needs to be delivered in the corridors of power. From my perspective, it's very intuitive. I have a lot of food for thought, obviously. I hope you have too. I would like to finish by thanking our speakers, for Tomo, particularly who's travelled all the way to be here today. And thank you very much. For Stephen, who was only come from Tullamore, made an excellent contribution. And for the three guys from Penn State, Ed, Eric, and Craig, for their diligence in getting up so early and joining us, but also for delivering an excellent thought-provoking presentation, which we can indeed use in the future. And finally, I thank Suzanne for all the technology and swapping and changing. A few glitches, but generally it went very, very well, and thank you very much. Thank you all for attending.